My name is Michael Turner, and I never imagined the day would come when my own daughter would call me homeless. Not after everything I did to raise her. Not after every night I spent working double shifts and every morning I woke up stiff from sleeping on old couches just to give her a better life. But life has a way of surprising you. Sometimes the people you love most forget how much you carried for them. It happened on a quiet Thursday morning in early fall. The trees in my neighborhood had started turning orange, and the air tasted like the season was shifting. I was sitting in the living room of the home I built with my own 2 hands. A place that held every memory I owned, my late wife's laughter, my daughter Emily's first steps, the dusty photo frames on the hallway wall. Then came the knock. Emily stood outside with her husband, Aaron, a man whose smile was always too wide for comfort. The kind of man who thought charm could replace character. I had never trusted him. Not the way he dodged questions, not the way he lived big on borrowed money. "Dad," she said softly, "we need to talk." The moment she sat down, her eyes avoided mine. That's when my stomach sank. She only avoided eye contact when she was about to break something fragile. And that fragile thing was me. "Dad, the house, it's already sold," she whispered. I felt something inside me go completely quiet. Not anger. Not shock. Just silence. "My home?" I asked calmly. She nodded. "We needed the money," Aaron added, smiling like he'd accomplished something impressive. And that was the moment my own daughter, the girl I raised alone, told me I no longer had a home. I didn't shout. I didn't even stand. I simply breathed out and thought, if this is what betrayal feels like, then let me meet it with silence. To understand how we reached that moment, you need to know a little about my life. I grew up in a small suburb outside Denver. My parents were simple people: church on Sundays, factory shifts during the week, quiet dinners around a small table. They taught me 3 things: work hard, love deeply, and never raise your voice unless absolutely necessary. Those lessons molded me. I married my childhood friend Laura when I was 24. She had a laugh that could soften the hardest winter. We built our home together, a modest 2-story place with white shutters and a porch swing she insisted on buying. That swing was where we had our first argument, our deepest talks, and our last shared sunset before she passed away. When Emily was born, Laura said, "Promise me you'll always protect her." I did. And I kept that promise, until the day she sold the house that held her mother's memory. Emily was a bright girl growing up, curious, clever, always asking questions about how things worked. But when she met Aaron at 22, something shifted. He was older, charming, the kind of man who used smooth words the way others used tools. I tried to welcome him at first. But the red flags were everywhere. He never kept a job longer than a few months. He always had a business opportunity brewing. He borrowed money from his own family and never paid it back. And worst of all, he made my daughter believe they were above living simply. Emily changed. She talked fast, spent faster, and stopped listening completely. Still, I stayed patient. Patience is the one thing life never managed to steal from me. When the pandemic hit, Aaron's debts grew. He tried trading, real estate flipping, even selling used cars. Every plan failed. And instead of learning humility, he learned desperation. The pressure tightened like a rope around their marriage, and apparently, around my home. I had no idea Aaron had convinced Emily to transfer partial ownership of my house temporarily, to access a loan. I didn't know they were behind on payments. I didn't know they owed people who weren't patient like me. Until that Thursday morning. "Dad, please understand," Emily said. "We didn't have a choice," Aaron added. I simply nodded. I've learned that sometimes, people tell you who they are not through their words, but through their choices. And their choices were clear. They needed money. And they decided that my home, my memories, were easier to sacrifice than their pride. That was their mistake. They thought taking my home would break me. But they didn't know that a quiet man isn't a weak man. He's a man who waits for the right moment to stand. Where do you expect me to go? I asked. Emily twisted her wedding ring nervously. For now, maybe you could stay with Uncle John? Or in a motel. It's temporary, Dad. We just need time. Aaron chimed in. Think of it as a fresh start. That house was old anyway. His words slipped into the room like cold wind. Old? That house was the last link to my wife. But I didn't react. Sometimes silence hits harder than shouting. I packed my essentials, a few clothes, some tools, Laura's letters, and the old pocket watch she gave me on our 10th anniversary. When I walked out of my home for the last time, I didn't look back. Because looking back doesn't change anything. I stayed at my brother's place for nearly 2 weeks. He kept asking, Mike, why aren't you angry? But anger doesn't build. Anger destroys. And I wasn't about to let their betrayal take more from me than it already had. Instead, I listened. I observed. And slowly, I began to understand something important. The house wasn't theirs to sell. Not legally. They had transferred partial ownership without my consent, and claimed I had agreed verbally. But I had every document stored, including a notarized statement declaring I never transferred or promised ownership to anyone. That was the first string in the web they had woven. And it was already beginning to unravel. I didn't tell my brother what I discovered. I didn't tell anyone. Quiet revenge works best when only one person knows it exists. Meanwhile, Emily and Aaron were celebrating their financial freedom online. New photos at restaurants. New clothes. New smiles. But behind their eyes, I could see fear. Because money gained through betrayal doesn't stay long. One evening, my brother tossed a newspaper on the table. Mike, isn't that your house? There it was. My home, listed again, this time by a new agent. Apparently, the investor Aaron sold it to plan to sell it again at double the price. My home had become a tool in other people's hands. But tools can be reclaimed. A week later, I met the investor privately. A man named George Winters, known in the area for flipping properties. I'm interested in buying the house, I said. He raised an eyebrow. You know its history? I nodded. George leaned back. Look, it's a good property. But the previous sellers, your daughter and her husband, they were complicated. I imagine. They defaulted on half their agreement. Left unpaid fees. The title transfer wasn't completed. I was advised to drop the property entirely. And did you? He smiled. I like opportunity when I see it. So did I. I didn't tell him I was the original owner. Not yet. Over the next few weeks, things began to crumble for Emily and Aaron. Aaron's debtors resurfaced. They demanded their money. The money he made from selling my home? Gone. Spent. Wasted. Emily called me once. Dad, things are messy. We're figuring it out. I listened quietly. She sighed. You're not mad at me, are you? I'm disappointed, I answered gently. Disappointment is quieter than anger. And longer lasting. She didn't know how to respond. Meanwhile, I had filed a legal inquiry into the sale, not out of spite, but to reveal the truth. The lawyer confirmed what I suspected. The sale was invalid. Every signature they forged. Every document they manipulated. Their entire scheme was falling apart. And they had no idea I was the one pulling the threads. I sat across from my lawyer, a calm man named Stephen Clark, who had a habit of tapping his pen twice before speaking. Michael, he said, I've reviewed everything. Your daughter and son-in-law committed fraud. The buyer didn't complete the transfer. Legally, the house is still yours. I nodded. Then let's proceed. He paused. You understand this will expose them? I looked out the window before answering. They exposed themselves. We filed the complaint. And like a slow-moving storm, consequences began forming. First came the bank's notice to Emily and Aaron. Then the calls from debt collectors. Then the legal letter informing them the sale was contested, and likely invalid. They panicked. Emily tried calling me 5 times in one morning. I didn't pick up. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because silence teaches lessons words cannot. Later that week, Stephen informed me that the property investor, George, wanted to meet. When I entered his office, he stood up immediately. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "That it was my house?" I smiled softly. "You didn't ask." He laughed. "Fair enough. I've decided to release the property back to you with minimal fees. It's not worth the hassle." I shook his hand. "Thank you." He shrugged. Sometimes it's easier to return something to the man who actually cares. And just like that, my house was legally mine again. But revenge isn't about taking something back. It's about letting truth take its natural shape. A week later, Emily and Aaron arrived at my brother's house unexpectedly. Emily's eyes were swollen. Aaron looked like a man finally facing the weight of his own choices. "Dad, we didn't know," Emily cried. "We didn't know everything would fall apart." I listened as she spoke, not interrupting, not accusing. "Please, we need help. Just for a while." I took a long breath. "Emily," I said, "when you sold my home, you didn't leave me homeless. You left yourself without a place to return." Aaron opened his mouth, but I raised my hand gently. "You too made decisions without wisdom. You thought money created security. It doesn't. Character does." They looked down. "And while I forgive you, forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You'll have to face those yourselves." Emily cried harder. Aaron stared at the floor. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't loud. I was simply honest. Sometimes honesty hurts more than punishment. Over the next month, everything changed. The court ruled the sale invalid. My house was restored fully to my name. Emily and Aaron were held responsible for the debts they created, not me. Aaron took a job for the first time in years. A real job. Long hours. Low pay. But honest. Emily moved into a small apartment far from the one she dreamed of living in. It was old, worn, and quiet, the kind of place where you hear your own thoughts clearly. Sometimes life puts you in small rooms so you can hear the lessons echo louder. I didn't abandon her. I visited occasionally. I brought groceries. I checked in. But I didn't become their safety net again. One evening she asked me, "Dad, do you hate me?" I shook my head. "Hate is loud, Emily. I don't carry anything loud inside me anymore." "Then why are you so distant?" "Because distance teaches what closeness cannot," I said softly. She nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. Meanwhile, I repaired my home quietly. Repainted the walls. Kept Laura's photos in the hallway. Sat on the porch swing each evening and let the breeze remind me that peace often arrives after storms, not before them. A few months later, Aaron asked to meet me privately. We sat behind a diner, sipping coffee in the cool autumn air. "I was wrong," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I treated your daughter poorly. I treated you worse. I thought shortcuts would save me. They rarely do." He looked ashamed. "But thank you. For not tearing us apart publicly. For not shouting. For not destroying us when you could have." "Quiet consequences last longer," I replied. He nodded. "I'm trying to be better. That's all anyone can do." From that day forward, I noticed a change in him. Not perfect. Not fast. But real. Sometimes the greatest revenge is making someone face themselves. It has been a year since the day they sold my home. Now when Emily visits, she pauses by the porch swing, running her fingers along the wooden armrest, remembering her mother's stories. Sometimes she cries. Sometimes she smiles. Last week she said, "Dad, I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your trust. But I'm learning. I'm growing.
I know, I replied. She hesitated.
Do you think we'll ever be the same? I looked at her gently.
No, I said.
But we can become something better. Pain changes relationships. But it doesn't have to end them.
As for me,
I sit in my living room each evening, watching the light fade through the curtains Laura sewed years ago. I think about betrayal. I think about patience. I think about the quiet roads life takes us down, the ones where anger has no place, and silence becomes its own kind of wisdom. My daughter sold my home for her husband's debts.
She called me homeless.
But she didn't expect that losing the roof over my head would give me the clearest view of my own strength.
I didn't seek destruction.
I didn't seek revenge in flames or fury.
I let truth speak.
I let consequences arrive naturally. I let silence do its work. And in the end, justice found its way without me lifting my voice. Life taught me something through this journey, something I now carry in every quiet breath. Sometimes silence is the best revenge.